every week, at least for the past few weeks, we've been doing, this thing.
We've been consistent.
I don't know if you know it. I don't know if they know it or not.
They know.
Another press play for you guys. This time we are finishing a conversation we were having about The Godfather. We are doing a review of The Godfather because we've gotten a lot of news from all things Godfather. They're working on a redo of 3, or essentially just like a re-editing of 3 of The Godfather Part 3. And
maybe I'll watch that.
You said maybe
I'll wait till they re-edit it. Make it 1 hour or 2 hours shorter. It's 45 minutes.
Yeah, it'll be like 5 minutes shorter and it'll still be terrible. But we got word this past week that Oscar Isaac is going to be playing Francis Ford Coppola, and they're doing basically like a behind the scenes, almost like they did with the Disaster Artist with James Franco, where they were doing like the behind the scenes, like it's a movie, it's a fictionalized version of the making of an actual real movie.
Yeah. Didn't Jim Carrey recently do one where he did like the making of like the Monty Python?
You might have, didn't see it.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Jim Carrey did something like that too recently. But yeah, so the movie starring Oscar Isaac as well as Jake Gyllenhaal is going to that movie is going to be about the making of the Godfather.
Yeah, it's going to be so interesting to see who they cast and like what the roles are. Like, who's going to be who's going to play Michael, or I guess Al Pacino in this case, who's going to play who's going to play Marlon Brando. That's some big
we saw
shoes.
what they did with The Irishman. Al Pacino could probably play Al Pacino if they get this.
That's fair.
They get the crew who edited. Well, no, don't get the crew who edited Lion King.
No. Yeah. If you see him across the hall, you're just like, no. Just leave him over there. They don't need to be involved in this process. It's going to be hard getting Marlon Brando since he's dead. So that might be a little difficult.
I mean, they reanimate his what they did with Fast and Furious.
Yeah, what did they do with Fast and
They got Paul Walker's 2 brothers. They just digitally augmented.
You saw how quickly they abandoned that. They were like, "Yeah, we're not bringing you back for the next movie."
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyways, without wasting too much time, look, I figured that we already talked about one. We were talked about like a lot of the different things in terms of like the cinematography, the music, all that stuff. Right. A lot of that stuff sort of carries over into The Godfather 2. I believe that they had a lot of the same sort of like motifs, like we talked about, like the cinematography, right?
Yeah.
How they shot certain things and how their use of shadows. All that is still apparent in 2, but you're trying to accomplish a different thing. What the 2 main things that I want us to hash out is what we think about the plot of this second one, and then we want to compare and contrast. What is the better film? The first Godfather or Godfather Part 2? It's an argument that has stood the test of time. So let's jump into the plot of Godfather 2. And of course, if you don't know, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, written by him as well as the writer of the books, Mario Puzo, I believe is his name. And so this part 2, the synopsis for it is about the early life and career of Vito Corleone in 1920s New York City. And it's portrayed, so that's portrayed, and then that runs alongside sort of like a different sort of part of the movie, which is focusing on Michael, his son, who is now more established. We saw from part 1 that Michael becomes basically the Don himself. He becomes the Godfather, so to speak. And so it shows how he sort of creates his tighter grip on power. And so it takes us through, as far as like power with the mafia. And so, yeah, let's talk about this story and kind of how did you feel about the plot of the film? I know you had some pretty strong reactions.
So it took me 2 days to finish this film.
Yeah. It did have an intermission there in the middle. Like it literally, it has an intermission part for you.
So I'll say this: the first movie I really enjoyed, and I think I gave it well, I'm not gonna say I liked it, and in our first review I spoke mostly positively about the film. One, because I think it was a good body of work. 2, because I think our listeners want to hear hey, what did you like about the thing? It is going to be hard for me to say positive when talking about this film, not because it was a bad film. So sticking to the plot again, this follows Michael Corleone as the dude Corleone. Michael Corleone as the Don of the family. The movie ended, which I think the last movie he essentially had the 5 heads of the 5 families in New York killed. The family now moves out to kind of operations now move to Las Vegas, Nevada, where they have he's killed Mo Green and now essentially assumed a staking controlling interest in Nevada, right? Now he's playing the political game, trying to what he says is move the family out of like the mob business and move them into like clean money, right? Into but all while he's trying to navigate the nuances that are being at the top, right? You have to find the snakes in your own garden, right? Your family and friends who are trying to dethrone you. You have to defend yourself against, foreign enemies, and you have to also defend yourself against the justice system, right?
Yeah.
So what I saw was Michael trying to navigate that system while consolidating wealth, while kind of like unraveling a bit. On top, and the flashbacks showing his father, Vito Corleone, I feel like it was Vito Corleone. I feel like for me that was just showing like the parallels between like the two men.
Yeah. So I loved the way that they did that, right? And I will admit I was very confused because the first time I ever really went back to like watch it outside of being a kid was I watched they did this thing where they basically chronologically took you through the movie. So you watch that whole part where Vito's in 1920s New York. You watch that in chronological order through the first movie, through that. Then you watch the first movie, then the second movie, the parts in the second movie that were just Michael, and then of course the third movie, which was confusing to watch, and then try to understand exactly sort of like what the themes are, because I think it fucks with why they put certain things in certain places.
Yeah.
So at the time, I think when this came out, it was like kind of like a weird thing to do, to have like the flip back and forth between times that, you're going between 1920s New York and what is currently in terms of, I think the Godfather is supposed to be like we're in like the 1960s or 70s here. And so I loved that they flip between that, because it gives you this sort of like it helps you understand both Michael as well as Vito and their motivations for the things that they do. In the review of the first one, we talked a lot about that Michael was inspired or motivated to protect the family, or at least that's what he said he was doing, but his actions weren't necessarily to that end, right? And at the end of it, you kind of realize like he's just doing it for like power, like he's addicted to power, and that protecting his family is kind of just like a necessary thing to do in that case. It's so interesting, right? In this second one, when we're talking about Michael's storyline specifically, it's the movie split between two movies even within that, and that's what I think is like mind-blowing to me about the movie. The first part of the movie is actually like it's a mystery, right? Because he's trying to figure out who betrayed him.
Yeah.
And he just basically runs around everywhere. I think he goes down to like Havana or somewhere like that. Where does
I believe they're in Havana.
He's in Cuba, right?
Yeah.
He goes down to Cuba. He's trying to do this deal, but he's trying to like suss out like who's betraying him. And then lo and behold, he finds out it's Fredo.
Yeah.
Fredo's the person who betrayed him, his own brother, right? And so the movie's like, it's, and you say you didn't like it, but I saw it completely differently, in that it's this really it's ultimately like a tragedy, right? The Godfather, I think, saga is just a tragedy, like that's the themes that it's trying to go after. It's trying to convey this sort of tragedy, almost like a play in a way. But it's this tragedy because of Michael, in that our perception of Michael, that we see Michael as this hero, as our protagonist, and every time we do that, we are always duped, because Michael is definitively not the hero at all, and it's arguable about who is or who is the protagonist, who is our hero, whose journey are we actually trying to follow, and who should we actually be rooting for here. It should definitely not be Michael, because he's the one doing the most fucked up shit for the dumbest reasons, right? So we get to this point in the movie where Fredo betrays him, and he's basically like, "Hey, Fredo, you're dead to me. Don't want to talk to you. Don't want to see you. You don't exist to me anymore. If you want to talk to our mom, let me know ahead of time so that I'm not there, you know? And then their mom dies and Fredo shows up and everybody thinks, okay, Michael's like making peace with them again. And then by the end of the movie, and Fredo doesn't do anything for the rest of the movie. Fredo's, you know, he basically is just like, you know, just this kind of like almost like pitiful character of just like, you know, going fishing with Michael's son. And like, that's like the one thing that he actually like does. Right. What's how we figure out that Michael's like really the true villain of the story though, is then that we think that he forgives Fredo, or at least by the time that their mom dies, that he's like, okay, like all's forgiven. But he already promised Fredo, he's like, as soon as our mom dies, I'm gonna kill you. Yeah. Like, I can't kill you while she's alive because I can't have her see that. As soon as she dies, you're gone. You know? And he, sure enough, you know, he holds up to that promise by basically killing Fredo. And Fredo at that point is just like, you're just killing him just to kill him at that point. But what that showed in that final
despite
scene,
the fact that Fredo had like kind of like re-established a relationship with Michael's son.
Exactly. Right. So Michael's like, fuck that. Right. But that's the tragic thing about it, is if you go all the way back to the beginning of one, when Michael comes back from the war, right? We think we have this perception of Michael that he went to this war, he fought for his country, and he came back and he kind of just wants to stay away from the family business because he just doesn't like the shit that they're involved with, right? It's not even remotely that at all. With that final scene of the movie, what you realize is that the reason why Michael, because the final scene is Michael talking to his brothers, right? They do the scene basically with Sonny, and this throwback scene to Sonny, Tom there, and they're talking about Vito, that, oh, Vito's, you know, he's coming, he's here. And Michael saying, hey, I'm going to go to the military. And they're like, well, why? Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, no, you're supposed to be here with the family. And he's like, no, I just want to go. What you realize is that Michael's not doing that because he just like wants to go fight in war. He just doesn't like the family, like as people. Like, he just doesn't, family to him doesn't mean the same thing that it means to them. So he's just going away because he just doesn't fuck with them, you know? Not because of the business, not because of any of that, just because he doesn't fuck with them, right? And then you take that to like how he kills Fredo, and you realize that he didn't do any of these things to protect his family. He just did it because Michael just likes power, right? Because if he really cared about family, right, no matter what Fredo did to him, he couldn't fucking kill Fredo, right? Yeah,
maybe send Fredo off, maybe like distance him from the family, have Fredo go back to Corleone.
Especially with how meek and like kind of fumbling Fredo is, just like, you kill him?
Yeah.
So yeah. So that's to me why it was a really powerful movie, because it forces you're so confused because you don't know who the fuck to root for. You're rooting for Michael the whole time because you're following his journey, but ultimately he's not the hero of the story, which is like a really twisted and fucked up thing to think, that you've been, it's like, you know, you've been somebody like your best friend the entire time is like a fucking psychopath and like fucking murders people. And you're just like, yeah, well, didn't see that coming.
At the end of the first film, you see Michael take that transition, right? You see him step into, he's the Don now, and like he kind of, he's a little bit darker, right? At the beginning of this film, you see him like in power, right? And like now you're watching how that power has like influenced and affected who he is as a husband, as a father, as a leader of the family. And you want to root for him because you're like, all right, you know, get the family out of the mob business, go, you know, clean up the money, you know, save your marriage with your wife, be a father to your children. But like you said, for him, it's, you know, at a certain point, it's just power.
It's just
like,
power.
You know, I think he even was he talking to Hal or Tom about like what to do with Fredo?
Yeah.
And he was basically just saying like, you know, like I think somebody was saying like, you don't have to kill him, you know, and he was just like, well, you know,
it is what it is. Like, yeah. But what was beautiful about it is that they did the contrast, but that's why they did all the background of Vito, right? And that's why you get that, and you see what family means, because you see him holding little Michael, and you see that Vito's not malicious in that he's like going to be this boss, right? But he's not malicious in anything that he's doing. It's nothing he's doing is just like, well, I just want a solid hold on power. And you know, he's doing everything so that people can't push him and his family around, that he's established, and that like the Don that Gigi was in Chon, in power at the time in 1920s in New York.
I'm sorry. You're talking about the Don in New York.
In New York. So Vito ends up killing him, but it's not because like, oh, I just want power. It's because that dude was just fucking robbing
Yeah, he had
people
to
and
go.
shit.
He
You
had to
know,
go.
he was fucking treating people like shit. You know, and it's just like he's just taking from the neighborhood, but never actually helping the neighborhood. Vito was different in that he helped people with problems. Like, look, his wife had friends who would come over and complain to him about problems. He's like,
Yeah.
all right, fuck it, I'll
And
go
he
ahead and
talked
take
to
care
the
of it.
landlord. He got the dog.
Exactly.
Right. And he could have went and killed the landlord. Right?
No,
Yeah.
he just talked to him though. He's just like,
Exactly.
hey, you might want to do this.
So,
you know?
and I did love that contrast where you see Vito as like, all right, he really did everything for the family. Even when he went back to Corleone and he killed Don Cici, Chichi, whatever, the old guy in the chair when he like stabbed him through the stomach.
Yeah.
That was
for his parents.
Yeah, and so that's not necessarily protecting the family, but it's also like avenging your family. I
Yeah,
mean, this person.
That's how much he cared about family. Is that the
Exactly.
only reason why he's going to harm somebody is because they did harm to the family? Now you can kind of argue that with Michael a little bit, in that like first it was like an attack on the family that Michael was trying to figure out who betrayed him, but the reason why he ends up killing Fredo wasn't because he was like afraid of his family being in danger. He was just like, oh, you betrayed me, so you're gone, even though he's his family. So it's like this contradiction in a way. So I appreciated the fact, the contrast of you see Vito and the motivations of why he's doing things, and then you see Michael and the reason why he's doing things. Now it's ironic that the last kind of image we see of Vito in that case is of Vito holding Michael with his family and everything. The last image we see of Michael is Michael all alone in this fucking in this cabin, just
to be honest,
alone.
that was what I thought was the best part of the film is like when you see Michael when they're at the table. It's Sonny, it's Michael, it's Fredo, it's Tom, and Vito's on his way home. The camera like cuts away for a moment, then it cuts back to the dinner table, and Fredo's gone.
Yeah,
he's not even there.
Yeah,
it's not like you saw Fredo get up and walk into the room where Vito's going to be. Fredo's just not there.
Yeah,
and then Tom and Sonny, go walk into the other room. You see Sonny calling Michael, and then at the end of it, Michael's just alone at the table.
Yeah.
And that's even though that's calling back to like during a time when Vito was alive, it's still how he is at this moment.
Absolutely.
Like present day, right?
Yeah.
He's alone at the table. His wife's left him.
He's alone in the cabin because like when Fredo dies, he's like watching out onto the water as Fredo's dying, and Michael's just alone. The kids are gone. They got taken somewhere, and like Kay's not around anymore.
Yeah,
and so he's just alone then, and he was alone back then when you're talking about where he's just sitting at the table alone. And I thought that seeing that was magical, and
you kind of understand like that's maybe even what he prefers.
It would appear that that's exactly what he likes. I don't know if we have enough time to hash out what is the better film. Maybe it's a better thing we come back next week and really duke it out for what is the better film, Godfather 1
and
or 2.
like let's have the full discussion because I think we may want to spend more time on what is better and why.
Yeah.
I want because I finished it last night. I would really like some time to reflect on like the real reasons, not just like one. And honestly, for me, maybe I watched it at a bad time, and because it was just last night, I think. Maybe give me like another couple of days and I'll be able to say it's not going to be cinematography because that was consistent. Music was consistent. I want to focus on the characters and the story development. So far, there's one character in which I've found to be interesting and consistent and like the glue of it all. But I want to save that. I think we may have the same guy.
I like it. Let's hold it for next week. So we won't discuss it today.
We'll open up the next episode with that discussion. I think that's the best way.
Yeah, that's called a cliffhanger. That's what they do. And
on the next episode of Dragon Ball Z. You remember that as a kid? Oh my god!
Yeah, it was the worst. And it always ruin your day. It would be like 5 episodes where it's just like, yo, just do the
where
fucking
you're like
thing.
Goku, just drop the spirit bomb. Then like, on the next episode
he's holding
of
it
the
for
Fade
like
podcast.
5 episodes. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll come back next week. We'll discuss, the ins and outs of what we think is the better film, and you'll hear sort of our through line for what we think of the series overall. We might talk a little bit about 3. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to require you to watch 3. I think it would be good because I think it would be hilarious to talk about. But
if I had the time stone, I would just stop time and watch it so I wouldn't waste those 3 hours. Not that I'm not saying it's a waste, but I would just stop time for a second.
Fair enough. Go talk to Thanos about that. We'll see. But we'll be back, ladies and gentlemen. Let us know what you think about The Godfather. What you think about the part 2 of the film. Do you think it's better than the first one? Worse than the first one? Let us know your comments about that. With that being said, we have arrived at another end to the Fade podcast episode. Fantastic episode. We deliver the goods each and every week. Here's me tooting our own horn, but and if you listen to us through and through, of course you're a fan of the podcast, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that share button, share the shit with anybody and everybody who can benefit from that, from the podcast, which is of course everybody. And yeah, we'll keep pushing. We will be back next week, same time, same place. Although I guess this is all taped, so maybe it's not. I don't know. Depends on what time you're listening to it, but